As our guest today, Goher Mobed, who is Minoo Kharas' daughter. Minoo Kharas was one of Baba's Mandali, one of the 120, and she's going to talk today about growing up with Meher Baba. All yours.
Thank you, Dad. Well, Jai Baba, everyone. It is so wonderful to be here at Meherana. This is our first trip here, and then thank you for inviting us. So I'm going to basically tell you about my father, Minoo Kharas, who was one of Baba's intimate mandli, one of his 120 disciples. And the story is all about his spiritual adventures, and he had many of those, which finally brought him to his goal, which was his quest to find God. So I will begin with his early life and then go into his meeting with Baba. And once he met Baba, then after that, his training with Baba begins, because he had a few hurdles to overcome, which, like we all do, and how Baba trains him. And one of which is a very tenacious one. Anyway, and then his later years and our family and growing up with Baba from my side of the story. So, I'll begin with his early life. So as a child, my father was always very young child, 7, 8 years old, elementary school age, was very conscious of God. And who is God? And if there is such a thing as God, why can I not see him? Why can I not talk to him? You know, this was from his innermost self. This was like a very, very deep feeling, a deep concern of his. And as he grew older, this feeling only deepened. It just got deeper and deeper. And so he was determined that in this very lifetime, he would not only meet God, find him, meet him, but be one with him. And that was his goal. I mean, that was it. So, as his story unfolds, it becomes more than evident that he went through so many different experiences, so many spiritual adventures, if you will, but they all were propelling him to his inevitable meeting with God. So as a small child, he recalled all this, and with all these intense feelings and thoughts surging within him. His youth was a period of both elation and frustration. Why? Because he felt that if his dreams or his goal was not met, that's it. That would be the end of his life. That was his absolute 100% his goal. So he remained convinced that one day in this very lifetime he would ascend to the spiritual height required to find God. He was further convinced that God would take me along with him and then unto him. So as a child living with his elderly parents, who came from very humble background, he was badly neglected. He was one of 7 or 8 siblings, I believe, and he was one of the youngest, and his parents were quite elderly by the time. So his eldest sister took him under her care. She was married into a wealthy family. She knew that my father possessed many academic qualities. He was great in sports, in elocution, in debating, scouting, just excelled in everything. So she thought she would be able to afford him a better childhood, and so, give him the care that he needed. Now that was all fine, and he excelled in all his work, but his sister, who was bringing him up, was a very hard taskmaster. And if he came home with, say, 98 out of 100 on a test, she would punish him, and really punish him, to the extent that it was not very nurturing, so if you will. So as a young man, he kept up his search for God, looking for him everywhere and in everything, inquiring of those he might be able to help him in his search and satisfy his longing. So with that in mind, he goes into churches and mosques and talks to people who are spiritually minded. And in India, those abound, of course, on every street corner, if you will. But many of that led him down a wrong path. So to backtrack, when we go back to his childhood, what he would do was, growing up as a young man, he would go out to nature and have talks, look up into this firmament and have these talks with God. And he would find that very peaceful and very fulfilling. So he continued this habit, along with the deep conviction that he was certain that one day in this very lifetime, God would appear to him in human form. Now, running parallel to this intense longing for God, as he was growing older, Minoo was also in the grip of the usual common pull of lust, which is, assails most young people as growing up, nothing uncommon about that, but which in his case went largely unchecked. Now, he had nobody to fall back on, nobody to guide him. So without proper guidance, this sort of went out of control, if you will, in a little bit, and it negatively affected all his good qualities. Okay. So without proper guidance, he seemed like a lost soul. To further complicate matters, he was equally felt the pull of physical love. And this was because he was so fed up living with his sister, who was not the most nurturing person. But in the family, on the other side, there was another sister-in-law who had her own family, but who was just the opposite of his sister, very nurturing, very kind. She was actually my father's cousin, Adi Dubash's mother. So he runs and goes over and stays with her, and she takes him in as one of her own. So with this situation, it created some conflict within the family at times, and as years went by, he remained, but no matter what happened, he remained unaffected by all the negative repercussions about this feeling of great, intense love. And he started developing a great love for this lady that took care of him. Now, and she, on the other hand, reciprocated this love to the extent that at some points it felt like it was a volcano. It was so intense. And neither of them could understand why they felt so strongly about each other. So thus we see this amazing tug of war between the intense search for God on the one hand and the equally strong pull of lust-love feeling on the other. To add another aspect to this realm of lust and physical love, Minoo states that as a child, in more than one occasion, an unnatural physical offense was attempted on him by more than one person. But in spite of these disturbing episodes, he always felt he was protected by some invisible, supernatural power. With this background, one can only imagine the conflicting emotions and frustrations which were surging through him as a young man, but which eventually propelled him onward, and together with a series of unforeseen circumstances, brought him to the threshold of his beloved God. Now, Minoo had 4 friends when he was in his college years who were also spiritually minded. And together they made a pact, and they said, one will go east, one will go west, one will go north, one will go south. And whoever finds God first will let the others know. So, right. So, as I said before, he was to visit holy shrines, temples, churches, mosques, and others, crossing paths with many different people like sadhus and yogis, who abound in India. But none of this brought him any closer to finding his God. His faith and determination remained strong, however, until one day when a man who displayed wonderful occult and psychic powers attempted to commit an unnatural offense on him. And he finally managed to escape this after a fearsome struggle. This episode so disillusioned him that he vowed to make one last attempt, and if he failed, was committed to ending his life by his own hand. He was convinced that if God were indeed who he said he was, he would know the depth of his love and conviction and would find him and save him. Okay, so otherwise his life would end on a hill on the outskirts of the city. So a clear note was sounded to God, and on the appointed day, without informing anyone, he quietly slipped away to that location. Either his life would end, or by some miracle, he would be saved. Midnight was the appointed hour, and Minoo was fully expected, was ready for a fearsome, the former outcome. In other words, he was sure that his life was about to end. However, most miraculously and unexpectedly, one of his 4 friends, now imagine this, he's on this hilltop, it's midnight, almost midnight, and he's about to do the unthinkable. And all of a sudden he hears his name, Minoo, Minoo. And he turns and he finds one of his friends, the 4 friends, remember I said who were going in different directions? One of them comes running up the hill shouting his name. So he said, you have to come with me. So Minoo was surprised and found that he recognized, he mentions that he said, now that I found you, you have to come with me. He said, where? So he says, just come with me. You're supposed to come and meet this yogi who has been following you and who wants to see you. So he also discovered, this friend of his brings him to this old gentleman, this old yogi who lived by the graveyard. And when Minoo met him, he recognized this elderly yogi who lived next to the graveyards as being a teacher in his school. He was previously a teacher in Minoo's school. So, but in one of his nightly samadhis, these yogis go into trances and they go into deep samadhis of deep meditation. In one of his samadhis, he had seen the impending tragedy to befall Minoo and had tactfully but forcefully sent his friend to find Minoo and had inwardly guided him to the exact spot. Now imagine that, okay? I think this is one of the many unusual circumstances that shaped Minoo's destiny. Now you have to remember a few things that I mentioned from here on because it'll all come together. So now Minoo remembered reading in books. He was very fond of reading. He read many spiritual books and so forth. And he was overjoyed to discover in one called Kabir Vani by the acclaimed poet and perfect master Kabir Sahib that God does appear in human form at certain periods, certain spiritual periods. At last forgetting about the pictures. I'm sorry, I'm so inept about this. Okay, so that is when that's a picture of my dad sitting next to Baba on the bottom with Erich and Baba, and this is in the 50s, I believe. And anyway, we'll come back to that. So he remembered reading this book and reading about God coming at different spiritual periods, and he was very, very happy to know that in fact this was one of those spiritual times. So at last he had found God, if only in a book. So during this period, another curious thing happened. Suddenly, in the course of one day, Minoo went around collecting the images of all the previous avatars from the beginning of time. So beginning with Zoroaster, then Ram, then Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, and ending with the late mayor of Karachi by the name of Jamshed Nasarwanji Mehta. Now he also, who at that time was like his mentor in life, his ideal in life. Okay. And there's a connection between Jamshed Mehta and Gandhi and Baba. And I'll talk about that down the road as we go along. So he collects these images of all the different avatars, and he has them framed. And he mounts them on the head of his bed, starting with Zoroaster, then Ram, then Krishna, then Buddha, then Jesus, and at the bottom was this Jamshed Mehta. Okay, and he calls this the ladder of ascent, all right? Okay, so this also is going to play a significant role in his quest. Then one day, this old yogi told him that he would soon be doing parade. Now, this did not make any sense to Minoo, who was at that time working in an insurance company as a clerk. But the prediction soon came true as Minoo found himself bound for training as a student at the Central Police Training School in Nasik. When departing Karachi by ship, the old yogi came to see him off at the docks, garlanding Minoo and bowing down to him. How very strange, thought Minoo. Pandey then told him that in Nasik he would encounter a very holy man in a certain direction from the school, and that Minoo should not leave him at any cost. Little did he dream how important this prediction would prove to be. Let me go to the next shot. Let's see. That's it. Okay. Two events which occurred consecutively upon his arrival at the police training school illustrate the importance of Minoo's association with the yogi Pandey in Karachi, and further prove it was divinely orchestrated. On the very first evening of his arrival, around sunset, he walked out into the fields, as was his practice, to talk with God up in the firmament. And he was sitting on a boundary-marked stone, at the edge of a field. At the same time, one of the officers of the school was trying out a new gun. Oh, I need to backtrack. Before he left Karachi, this yogi had given him a few mantras mantra is something that protects you from things like gunshot wounds and snake bites and stuff like that. And he had given him some holy thread and whatever, and he told him to keep it on his person at all times. Minoo thought it was strange, but he obeyed the yogi in any way. So anyway, here he was sitting on this boundary stone, and from a distance, this officer was firing in his direction. So, so while this was happening, a bunch of workers at the school, including a barber, were standing on the side, and they saw this impending tragedy to take place, and they rushed to Dad's, to save him from all this. So, to try and save him from this near catastrophe, and immediately ran to him in a panic and found that miraculously he was unharmed. Minoo wondered if the mantras that he had been repeatedly assigned by the yogi had indeed protected him from gunfire. The next morning, that same barber, upon entering Minoo's room in his usual rounds to attend to the students, recognized him from the previous evening and noticed the ladder of ascent on the wall. Observing Minoo to be spiritually minded, thought he would be a total misfit at the school, because you know how young guys are when they enter these type of school. They're not in any way or shape, in spiritually minded like this. So anyway, upon seeing that, he suggested to Minoo that he had to go and see a certain holy man who was then residing at the Circle Cinema on Bombay-Agra Road in Nasik. Upon hearing this, Minoo remembered, and he gave the name of the person he was talking about. Upon hearing this, Minoo remembered with a shock the prediction of the old man, Pandey. Because he had told him that when you go to Nasik, you'll be going in a certain direction, you'll meet this holy person. And here was this barber telling him the same thing. So anyway, so he was further shocked to know the identity of this holy man as Meher Baba. Now, where did he hear this name before? He seemed to remember hearing this name several years back. Well, it so happened that during his school matriculation exam, while staying at his aunt's house in Karachi, he had gone to the toilet and come across a magazine called Hindi Graphic in the toilet, which was placed there as toilet paper. And on the cover of the magazine was a photo of a holy man with the caption, His Holiness Sri Meher Baba. This was in 1928. And it was during this period that Minoo was at the height of his frustration, considering all so-called saints and sages and holy men as nothing short of cheats and rogues because of all the, negative stuff he had gone through. Even so, he did not appreciate the idea of the photo of a man said to be holy to be kept in a toilet. So he tore the cover of the photo off and he put it between two pieces of blotting paper because he was on his way for his matriculation exam at the time. Okay, and he goes off to his exam. The next day, on his way to the examination, he realized he had forgotten to wear his kasti the sacred thread that the Zoroastrians wear during their Navjot ceremony. He had, forgotten to wear his kasti as a devout Zoroastrian, but he didn't have time to return for it, so he just continued on for his exam. During the exam, a curious thing happened when a small piece of paper slipped off his desk onto the floor, and out of it fell the photo of Meher Baba. Thus, this Meher Baba had accompanied him to the exam, while with all the zeal of a religious Zoroastrian, he had forgotten to wear his kasti. A second incident occurred while playing a game of billiards with some friends, when out of the blue, one of them mentioned this Meher Baba had stopped in Karachi and was on his way to Bombay from Iran. Minoo wanted to immediately rush off to meet him at the docks, but he found out he was too late because Baba had already sailed. So he remembered these two incidents of when he had heard Baba's name. So Minoo was informed by the Baba, was determined now to go and see him. So Minoo writes in his journal, in his diaries, January 17th, 1932 was the happiest day of my life. Like a warrior of old, setting out fully armed to fight for his country, he set out fully armed for his holy expedition. He dressed himself in his usual white garments with a locket containing a small photo of Lord Zoroaster around his neck. The holy thread given to him by the yogi in his inside pocket, and a sandalwood mala, which is a religious rosary, for prayers. Thus he felt secure and fully prepared. Upon arrival at the compound that Sunday morning, he was met by 3 disciples, Ramju, a Muslim, Vishnu, a Hindu, and Dadachanji, a Zoroastrian, one after the other. When asked who he was and the purpose of his visit, to each he replied, I am a pagal. Pagal means madman, okay? Come here to visit an elder pagal. Okay. Although he realized that these words sounded idiotic to them, he felt convinced that they would internally convey to Meher Baba, if he was really holy, the silent and hungry heartbeats of a true seeker. Within minutes, the man called Meher Baba suddenly came out and stood just a few feet away. Minoo notes, into quotes, he appeared young, strongly built, strikingly handsome, and clean-shaven. His lovely hair flowed. I keep forgetting the pictures. Okay, there you go. His lovely hair flowed down to his shoulders, and he had a beautiful smile. Okay. Unforgettable smile on his radiant face. He wore a long white robe-like garment with a hip-length collared coat of cream color, and he was holding a small wooden board. So this is probably how Baba looked at the time that Minoo first laid eyes on him. So, from the deepest part of himself, he felt a voice inside saying, Minoo, here is God whom you have been searching for. From that moment of spontaneous joy and bliss, Minoo knew his search had ended. Calling him into a room while seated on a mat on the floor, with the disciple Chanji on his right, Baba asked Minoo what he wanted. While keeping perfectly silent and fixing his gaze on Baba, Minoo addressed him from within, emptying out all of his pent-up frustration while telling Baba that if indeed he was who he said he was, he would know this and be able to satisfy his inner cravings. Astonishingly, using his alphabet board and via the disciple Chanji, Baba said, into quotes. I have heard you completely. It is since your birth that this instinct is there within you. Do not worry. Do as I say. Forget I. Every night, go to sleep in thoughts of me. Then began the verbal dialogue where Minoo unburdened himself with all the good and bad that he had experienced since memory began, and in his long search for God. He fearlessly told Baba about meeting the old yogi and showed him a picture, then began disarming himself of all his spiritual paraphernalia, confessing to all these childish things. Immediately, Baba replied, "This is not childish. It is this that has brought you to me." He further stated, you are connected with me since past lives. I have to repay the debt I owe you. That's what Baba said to my father. Not only you love me, but I love you. At the end of this momentous meeting, Minoo left with the feeling that was indescribable. He was totally convinced he had at last found his very own God and the Savior and the Messiah that the world desperately needed. He realized then that his efforts to this day had not been in vain, and the true significance of all the experiences to this point. He found himself recalling incidents from his childhood which had seemed previously inexplicable to him. For instance, when he was a young child, the old African watchman who guarded the house at night, now he was a child at that time, told him that around midnight, when he was fast asleep, God often came and sat beside his bed and actually caressed him. The watchman vividly described the appearance and dress of this being he felt to be God in human form. The description exactly matched that of Baba during his first meeting in Nasik. Furthermore, he learned years later that Baba was actually present in Karachi at that time and was living just a few houses away. Right. So, he also recollected that when visiting certain sages or holy ones as a child, as when he was in the presence of the renowned theosophist Krishnamurti, the sage looked at him with great reverence and took hold of his hands and placed them on his eyes, takes Minoo's hands and places them on his own eyes and kissed him, then placed his hand on Minoo's head with tears running down his face. So this tells me that advanced souls recognize something in Minoo that he himself was not aware of. So what his previous births had been, where he had, come in contact or not with advanced souls or his spiritual status, if you will, he had no idea, but that was what it was. Without a doubt, all these experiences and his entire life to this point had been a prelude of events and circumstances that brought Minoo to the feet of his master. He was blissfully happy that from here on, through eternity, he would have his own God with him every step of the way. But this was only the beginning, and Minoo realized he had a long way yet to go to know Baba as he really is, and to experience his ways and learn to obey him 100% if he hoped to earn his grace in order to overcome all the obstacles in his path. So after his initial meeting with Baba, Minoo could not keep away from him and would avail of every opportunity to be in Baba's presence, even going as far as defying school regulations, which were very strict. He was in the police training school, of course. But somehow, again, in spite of his truant behavior, he somehow or other escaped being caught in the act by the and subsequently punished. This would be pointed out by Baba while he was in his presence enjoying his company, when Baba would suddenly turn to Minoo and ask him why he was here at this odd hour. Perhaps Minoo thought this was to let him know that he was under Baba's protection. Nothing happened to him. During this time, Baba asked Minoo if he would obey him, and Minoo replied, certainly. Baba then gave Minoo his first order to read well, then adding, when I feel in the twinkling of an eye, I shall lift you up. Don't worry, I promise you I take your responsibility. Thus far, Baba had not directly addressed Minoo's consuming lust problem, but on the occasion of his 38th birthday celebration, which included a small darshan program. Let's see if I can find that. No, that's it. Okay. In front of all who were gathered, Baba said, he is perfect from top to toe, but his eyes are very bad. This open hint opened the door to future direct guidance by the Master, who helps each one eliminate the blocks to perfection. Minoo's training had begun in earnest, and along the way he learned many new lessons, such as implicit obedience. Once, after inadvertently and in good faith disobeying a wish of the beloved, Baba ordered him to go away in front of all. Minoo was crushed by this sudden rejection, not understanding the reason for his dismissal, and inwardly begged his forgiveness. When called back sometime later, he realized his mistake in not obeying Baba when told to go and have his lunch at a certain time. Minoo now knew that even the smallest wish was significant when it came to obeying the Master. Baba lovingly forgave him, admonishing at the same time to never disobey him again. During his stay in Nasik, Minoo had the privilege to be in Baba's company often as part of the mandli, taking part in games such as marbles, cricket, carom, ping pong, and cards. But this was also a period of suffering for Minoo, who was deeply agonized at certain intervals when Baba was touring in the West. Remember, this was the early 30s, and Baba often left and came to the West for trips. He was also suffering physically from bouts of acute appendicitis. Baba would sometimes give him a mixture of lime juice and ice cream, or even a whole raw lemon, which Minoo would consume, skin, seeds, and all. Okay. So, Baba also advised him to seek immediate treatment at once from the doctor at his school. At times when Minoo completely broke down, being overwhelmed between the physical and spiritual agony he was suffering, Baba would gently caress him like a mother would a child, saying, "Don't worry, you are exceptionally lucky to be so dearly loving me. Leave everything to me. I am doing my best." Baba then instructed Minoo to return to Karachi immediately, where his presence was. So this is the picture of Baba's birthday celebration in 1938, and you can see Dad right above Baba's head, right next to his mother. You see? So that was with his head poking out like this. That's Dad. This was 1938, I believe. Yeah.
It says it's the 38th birthday.
Yeah. 30, okay. So he tells him he needs to go back to Karachi because he's needed there. Baba tells him to go and attend to something very urgent in Karachi. So during this time, his lady friend, which is, the lady who brought him up, Adi's mother, who he was very close to, was undergoing a serious health crisis, which no one had informed him about. He then realized the importance of Baba's order to go there without delay, because he never wanted to leave Baba's side. Once he found Baba, he would create any and every opportunity to be in his presence, right? So anyway, so he goes to Karachi, and in the ensuing months, with Baba being away in the West, they both suffered periods of agonizing pain, illness, yet each of them kept each other uplifted throughout these trying times, with Minoo leaving the end result in his beloved's hands in total surrender. Okay, so now what I'm going to do something that's telling me to read. Yeah, I'm going to read something from the book God Seeker. Let's see, 61. They were going through all these sufferings, physical and such, and I found this paragraph in my father's book, The God Seeker, and it says, I informed Baba of my left eye fluttering for some time and told him, already 2 have died, and my sister, Suna, his older sister, the one who had taken him under her wing, was also dying in Karachi. He said, do not worry, even if 2,000 die. This is merely the changing of a coat. No one understands all about it, and you yourself will not die now, for you have a lot as yet to do with me. You will hear me talk, do many things for me, and finally rise with me. So I wanted to add that. So when Minoo returned to Nasik in early 33, Baba began integrating him more into the mandli and gave him the assignment of contacting the former mayor of Karachi. Remember Jamshed Mehta, who I mentioned, who had also been Minoo's ideal. At this time, Minoo was also struggling with feelings of anxiety at being separated from Baba, thinking that even if he passed his exams, he would have to leave Nasik and Baba. But Baba reassured him all would be well, even after he got a job, which he would be able to leave when Baba called him. More importantly, he gave Minoo a master key pertaining to his lust problem, telling him, today I am giving you a master key, which note carefully. He who always loves is in me, but he who engages in lust keeps away from me. Be very, very careful. If you really desire to be near and with me, avoid lust. As soon as you are dragged heavily by lust, close your eyes and try to concentrate on the root of the nose between the 2 eyes and think of me. Do not do this for a long time. He further stated, love lifts a man up while passion or lust drags him down below. Do not worry for being lifted up by love. Worry for being pulled down by lust. It follows that if you are not pulled down, you will automatically be pulled up. Remember, lust is one of the 3 or 4 blocks to spirituality that we face, isn't it? It's lust, it's anger, it's greed. Those are the 3 major ones, I feel. And lust is the most tenacious out of all of these. Anger, he said, if a person could conquer or sublimate his anger, he would be the bravest person on earth. But lust needs the grace of a master to be overcome. So, and in that regard, I had something else to read, which is connected to lust. So let me read that first. Okay. I found this little allegory that Baba stated in Lord Meher about overcoming lust. So during a discussion with the Mandli, just as an aside, I'm reading this to enhance the topic on lust. So he said, during a discussion with the Mandli about overcoming lust, Meher Baba narrated the following allegory. There was once a fight between energy and lust. Energy was defeated, so mind stepped into the ring. A terrible fight took place between mind and lust. Mind was not so easy to defeat, but in the end, lust won again. Soul entered the challenge. Soul challenged lust to a fight to the finish. The result of their match was that lust was defeated so completely, it never rose up again to challenge soul to a rematch. I thought that was wonderful. What an explanation that was. That was just amazing to me. So I had to add it in there. Anyway, Now, in March of 1933, Minoo was present at the wedding of Baba's brother Behram. And after speaking a few words which Baba asked him to speak spontaneously on the occasion, which Minoo enjoyed and appreciated, he presented Minoo with his alphabet board. So Baba gave the board he had to Minoo. He was so pleased with his speech that he gives his board to Minoo. And Minoo gave the one he had made, which he used during his times of observing silence, to Baba. This precious token, let me get to that. So that's another picture of the same event. There you go. So the board that you see on the top, the first picture with the little cutoff, is the board that was the first board that traveled with Baba to the West. And that was the board that was given to my father, and which is now in one of my prized possessions. Yeah. So, so we went through all that. Okay. So again, finishing up with his struggle about lust, Baba also said, this struggle was an eternal one, and one could hardly escape it on one's own unless he had the hand of a living master on his head to free him from it. But when Minoo protested, saying how even yogis of a high order had failed in this respect, what hope did he have to overcome it? To which Baba replied that he had to make the initial effort and then be worthy of his grace. In March of 33, okay, so then we come to where he presented him the board, and we went through that. Okay, so after passing his final exams at the police training school in Nasik, Minoo was appointed the job of sub-inspector of police in Karachi and was ordered by Baba to accept the position. There would now be a gap of 4 years when Minoo had no physical contact with Baba, but would remain connected via letters from the Mandli and sometimes from Baba. So, there's a humorous anecdote that I will read to you about this period when he was separated from Baba. And that is on page 85. Let's see. So, all right, so, okay. I take it back. This episode actually happened in the New Life when Baba was going away in the New Life. And it still pertains to the fact that Minoo was one of the Yeswalas, but he was told by Baba not to accompany him physically, along with the rest of the Mandli that were, the few of them that were. So the story goes that Baba had said to the Mandli, he had a meeting in Meherabad. He called the entire group that was yes-walas, no-walas, arrangement-walas, and had a meeting and said to them that only the people that were coming with him could bring, certain items, but certain items were not to be given to the Mandli by anybody else from the other group, including shirts, scarves, or anything like that. So my father, of course, felt this, again, being separated from Baba caused him great anxiety. But he thought of a way that he could circumvent this. At least something of his would go to Baba. So he says here, another time was, I had asked Dr. Ghani, who would be there, who was part of the group that went with Baba, to promise that after the first bowing down to Baba, no, sorry, this is unconnected. I'm sorry, this is not the right story. Oh, I was No, why is that over here? I'll tell it to you anyway. He said, no giving any shirts, no scarves or anything like that. But he didn't mention a walking stick. And Minoo had given his walking stick to Dr. Ghani. So when the time came for Baba to depart on the New Life journey, he was at the train station, and the train was about to leave, and Ghani had given the stick to another Mandli member, another person who was standing on the platform. Well, just before the train left, Baba leaned out the window and snatches the stick from the person who was holding it. So the entire trip of the new life, Baba had my father's walking stick with him. Yeah. So wasn't that clever of him, right? Right. Okay. So, so finally he receives a letter from Adi Sr., Baba's secretary, informing him of Baba's wish that he had to be present for his birthday celebration. We enjoyed that. And over 10,000 people were to be present. And these were the poor to whom Baba distributed cloth, sweetmeats, and grain, and touched their feet. Minoo was sent with some Mandli member to the Mast ashram in Rahuri. Now, this was a very important phase of Baba's life, too, working with the Masts. So Minoo goes to the Rahuri ashram, where he observes the different types of musts of God-intoxicated souls and their peculiar habits. This was another important phase in this advent of the beloved, and Minoo was to participate in this work, as he would soon discover. As a close member of Baba's intimate Mandali, that's Muhammad. As a close member of Baba's intimate circle of 120 disciples, Minoo was privileged to participate in many fasts and periods of meditation on the beloved, which was assigned to them as a way of helping the Master with his world work for humanity, especially during the dark years of World War II. In June of 47, Baba gave Minoo and some other Mandli members, 2 other people I think, the mission of trying to find musts in their own districts and bring them to the newly founded ashram in Satara. Never having undertaken such a daunting task previously, Minoo was naturally quite anxious, but eventually, being determined to fulfill Baba's wish, he managed the laborious and challenging undertaking and completed his mission successfully in transporting 3 musts from Karachi in spite of numerous hurdles and complications. Can you imagine? These people have very peculiar habits, and to transport them the distance from Karachi to Satara, which was, thousands of miles, I don't know how many, but and one would want to urinate, one would want to get off the train, it was a challenge to bring them successfully to Baba. But he managed to do it. And he was the only one of 3 Mandli members that were able to do this. Baba was very pleased, and he hugged Minoo and told him, "You are one of my most intimate Mandli." During 1947, while trying to organize a group, Baba group in Karachi, Minoo met Kekashru Patel and his family. Now that was my mother's family, one of whom was his daughter, Freni. So now I'm coming to the part where he comes a little closer to his personal life beginning. And there was a span of, so he met Baba in 31. This was not till the mid-40s. So there was a good period of time where he was a bachelor and, completely obeying Baba's orders in every way. But when he meets Freni and gets to know Kekashru's family, they soon developed a friendship that blossomed into a deeper relationship, and eventually, with Baba's permission and emphasizing his wish 3 times that they marry, they finally tied the knot in February of 1954. So Baba said to Minoo, of course, everything that he undertook at that throughout his life after meeting Baba was always with his permission. So he, mentions this friendship with Freni, and Baba says, "Marry Freni, marry Freni, marry Freni," 3 times. Don't know the significance of that, but that's how it went. So at first, Minoo's involvement with Freni caused much friction in his relationship with his lady friend, the other person who had brought him up, who was openly rebellious at the intrusion of this young interloper. But over time and after the marriage, she eventually accepted the union, and life was harmonious then. In December of that year, yours truly made my appearance okay, into the family. So here's my mother garlanding Baba at some point in the 40s, I believe. So, as with every event in his life, Minoo right away sent off a cable to Baba informing him of my birth and requesting him to name me. At the time, Baba was in strict seclusion, and therefore all the mail that was collectively put aside, all the mail that came from around the world was put aside and not addressed at all. Hence, I was nameless for a period of 4 months. I had no name. So Dad's, telegram sat or letter sat in one place, and that was it. My maternal grandparents were naturally concerned and upset. But Minoo stuck to his guns, as usual, and just waited patiently in complete trust and faith. Finally, in April of 1955, so I was known as Baby Kharas. Even my birth certificate was Baby Kharas. Okay. No name. My grandparents actually gave me a nickname so that they could then use that as, okay, now we come to this. So finally, in April of 1955, due to a tragic accident, when news reached Baba, briefly came out of seclusion. And what was this news? Adi Dubash, my father's cousin, who lived right behind our home in Karachi, had 2 sons. Mirwan was the older one, and Homi was the younger one, age 4. And in a tragic accident, Homi, age 4, fell from a 2nd-story window and died of head trauma. So when news of Homi's death reached Baba, he came out of seclusion briefly. That was the only stipulation in this seclusion, that if any of his near or dear ones were to pass away, that news was to be brought to him immediately. So when news of Homi's death came and Baba came out of seclusion briefly, all the collected correspondence was then brought to his attention, and one of them being Minoo's letter. So Baba called his women mandali and and made them stand in line. This is what my father tells me. He made them stand in line. Baba said, "Now there are too many Meras." In other words, by now I've given her name out so many times, Now, then he looks at money, pointing to money. No, money too many times. Next in line was Dr. Goher Irani, his personal physician. So he asked her if it would be okay to send her name. Dr. Goher replied, "As you wish, Baba." Baba said, "So be it." This was his expression, "So be it." Hence, that day, April 21st, 1955, Baba had Erich write and inform Minoo that today Baba has named your daughter Goher, into parentheses, jewel. The name Goher in Persian means jewel. Another treasured relic that I cherish to this day. So this is the letter that you see up on the board, and the underlined part and all the different. That's all my father is doing. Future, please, and then he's underlined Goher and jewel and to be given to Goher, whatever, when she grows old. Anyway, so another one of my treasured possessions. And then in 1960, my brother came along, my younger brother, and somehow the news had already reached Baba, who immediately sent a postcard naming him Meherji. So we were both named by Baba. My first physical meeting with beloved Baba came in 1962. Let's see. Oh, wait. I'm skipping. Yeah, okay, I forgot this. So I was born in December of 54, right? Baba names me in April of 55. In September of 55, he had a darshan program in Wadia Park in Ahmednagar, and my father was part of that meeting. So he took this picture of me along with him. I was about 6 months old here at the time, and he showed it to Baba. He said, "Baba, this is Goher." Baba takes that picture in his hand, looks at it, and then does this. So, anyway, so this was yours truly at 6 months. So my first physical meeting with beloved Baba came in 1962 at the East-West gathering held in Pune. I was almost 8 years old at the time, and I distinctly recall the excitement building up in me at the thought that I would be meeting him in person. So you see, in our home, I mean, I was born into a Baba family, so every 25th of the month was and our home in Karachi was the Baba Center, with Dad, of course, being instrumental in bringing most of the people in Karachi into Baba's fold. So as a child, I mean, growing up with this, I very naturally accepted him as God in human form. I didn't know any different. Sometimes I would be challenged by my classmates, when they found out, who's that? And, that's God. How can you say that? That kind of thing. So I said, wouldn't you like to know? So anyway, so I found myself at almost age 8. I was 1 month shy of my 8th birthday on November 1st, 1962, at the gates of Guru Prasad Palace, among thousands who had come from all over India and the West to partake of this joyous event. I remember thinking to myself as I walked to the back of the compound, and how I knew this, I have no clue, but I remember thinking to myself that I'll walk a certain distance, that the first thing I want to see is Baba. So I walked to the back of the compound, and I walked a little past the dais where he was seated. And as I turned around, all I wanted to see was Baba. And sure enough, as I turned around, there he was in all his glory, beaming pure radiance on the stage. I was lost in a timeless moment. I just remember that. I remember that so distinctly. I just stood there looking at him for I don't know how long. I watched as Baba gave darshan to thousands, one by one, bowing down and touching his feet. I recall the intense heat and humidity, and then all of a sudden, that was the first day, all of a sudden, the skies opening up with a tremendous thunder shower and drenching all of us nearer to the stage. I mean, we were soaked in a matter of minutes. Baba then instructed the Western and some of us Eastern women and children to be taken into the women mandali's quarters and be given some dry clothing. He was concerned about the Westerners, not being used to the Indian climate and so forth. So I found myself inside with the ladies, and Baba's sister Mani very sweetly gave me one of her dresses to change into. Subsequently, and then she, because I was only all of 3 feet high, one of her dresses, was way long, so she brought a ribbon and tied it around my waist and, hitched up the dress so I wouldn't trip. So obviously my mother must have returned the dress to her after we finished with it. But subsequently, after we returned home to Karachi, Mani sent me this dress. Where is that? This one, okay. Mani sent me this dress to keep as a keepsake of this occasion. Yeah. So, as a memento of this auspicious day, which is yet another one of my treasured possessions. Yeah. So, and then let's see, is that the next one? Yeah. So, of course, at that point, it was just kept aside, whatever. And then years later, in the early 90s, when I had my own family and we had traveled many times back and forth to India, I thought to bring this dress with me because now it actually fit me. And then when I met Mani at her office in Khushru quarters, I asked her, I said, Mani, do you remember this dress? And she looked for a minute and then, she said, and then she did, of course. So another one of my most precious possessions. So Baba also called at that time, during the East-West gathering, Baba would call different groups to meet with him personally, just a single group at a time, in this little side room in Guru Prasad. So I recall the first time standing in line with Dad. Now we are entering the room, imagine this, and there are adults in front of me, and I'm standing behind somebody My father's behind me. And peeking out, and I would, from time to time, I would just peek out like this to catch a glimpse of Baba, because now he was seated in very close proximity in this little room. So, finally, it was my turn, and this was the first time I was directly in his presence. I kneeled and lay my head on his feet, touching my forehead on each one, first left, then right, I believe, and then in the middle, while gently holding them. I just had my hands on them like this, and I did this, and I did this. I still remember that, and I put my head down in between. And and then I stood up, finally stood up, and I was in his loving embrace. Yet another timeless moment. The rest of the afternoon was spent sitting quietly at his feet while he conversed with some, and I recall Dad whispering in my ear to keep my gaze on him and drink in every drop so that, quote unquote, this memory will last you a lifetime. So even today, if I close my eyes, I can picture that. I can literally picture Baba in that little room and my time with him. The next and last physical meeting with beloved Baba came in 1965, when he had called only some Eastern groups. This time, when I stood up, and now I was almost 11, when I stood up after taking his darshan, he gestured, "How big you have grown!" When my brother Merji, who was not yet 5 years, bowed down to Baba, he just stayed there for a while. He wouldn't get up. He just put his head down and he just stayed there. And the women mandli who were peeking from the side, from the little slatted doors, were looking at him and saying, "How lucky is he?" Yeah. And so remarked how lucky he was. So we sadly lost my brother, as an aside, I'll just tell you, in 1986. He was my only sibling. And in 1986, as a result of a hijack, he was an employee of Pan American at the Karachi airport. And as a result of a hijacking that took place there on that day, he was actually a ground engineer, and his work was to service the aircraft, which in those days we didn't have the jetways connecting aircrafts to the terminal buildings. So everything had to be bussed back and forth. And his job as an engineer, a mechanical engineer, was to service the aircraft as they passed through Karachi. So he was doing his job, but he needed a fuel sheet to be signed by the captain. So he goes up into the cockpit, only to find the cockpit totally empty. This flight had come in from Bombay on its way to Frankfurt. And the day before, the authorities and Pan American had been tipped off that there might be some trouble on this flight. But in spite of that, they did not take any precautions. The only precaution they took was when the flight landed, they ejected the pilot and the co-pilot from the top hatch of the plane, not even down the gangway, so that the cabin crew had no idea that there was nobody in the cockpit. So when my brother goes up, he needed a fuel sheet to be signed by the captain. And when my brother goes into the cabin and finds nobody there, he's perplexed. But at that very moment, 2 jeeps pull up to the 2 gangways, and 4 Libyan terrorists dressed in security uniforms rush the plane with submachine guns, seal the doors, and the rest was history. So after a grueling, I don't know how many hours, 17 hours, I think, and in spite of my brother's warning that, a generator should be placed around the aircraft and so forth, nothing was done, and they started, when their demands were not met, they started shooting at random, and my brother was one of the first to be killed. When news of his passing reached the women mandli in Mirazad, Mira was very upset, and she was saying, "Baba, why? Why did you take him?" Because he had visited so many times and everybody just loved him. He was one of the kindest, sweetest souls you could imagine. So anyway, that was my brother's story. So we went through that. Okay. So our family also attended the last darshan in 1969, after Baba's dropping of his body at Meherabad, along with others from the Karachi group. Minoo was a volunteer guide and once more, and I recall at every darshan, large darshan, that he would volunteer to be one of the people to help out at the time. And I recall when we approached the hill at Meherabad on the bus from Nagar, Minoo jumped up and shouted, "Parvartikar Meher Baba ki jai," 3 times. And I was on the bus with all these Western people, from Pune. And so we were housed under huge tents that had been set up. This was also for the first and second Amar Tithi, which we had also attended. And thousands, once again, had journeyed from all corners of the globe to partake of this. This was the first and second Amar Tithi, to take place of this precious time at the feet of their beloved. So, growing up with the example and the magnetic personality that was my father, Minoo, I had the privilege of learning from one of the best. The lessons of faith and obedience, in particular, were some of the strongest, which left a lasting impression on me and which have repeatedly stood me in good stead throughout my life. So I will share a few stories with you during the course of Minoo's journey with Baba, which highlight these qualities. So first, on the topic of obedience, an incident which took place in Delhi in 1941, while Baba was in strict seclusion. All lovers and Mandli members had been instructed to avoid contact with Baba, even to the point of turning away if they saw him by accident. This was during the new life. Okay. Minoo was at a critical point at this time with all kinds of personal pressure weighing him down, and also being at a critical point of breaking Baba's order regarding his personal weaknesses and not being allowed any contact at the time, had decided to take a pilgrimage to bathe in the river Ganges. He thought to himself, okay, I'm not allowed to see Baba. This is the new life. I don't know if I'll ever see him, because Baba never mentioned that, when he would come out of the new life or what would happen going down the road. So Minoo was desperate at this time, and so he thought, that's it, I have to cleanse myself somehow, so I will go and bathe in the Ganges. Okay. So, a level of absence from work was virtually impossible at the time. This was during the war years. So, nevertheless, he approaches his superior officer for permission to leave, which was laughed at first, being out of the question. Incredibly, a few minutes later, the officer handed him an immediate order from his commanding officer for Minoo to leave at once for Delhi on an urgent secret mission. As it happened, he was at the train station in Delhi, and lo and behold, he saw Baba on the opposite platform. But remembering Baba's order, he immediately shut his eyes and turned away. With a heavy heart, knowing how close Baba was, but obedient to his order, he went back to his hotel and was in desperately miserable state all night. Towards dawn, there was a knock on his door, and he was amazed to find Chanji and a few of the close Mandli. Chanji said he had been sent by Baba, who was very pleased with him because of his implicit obedience at the train station, but wanted to know what this recent urge to go and purify himself in the Ganges was all about. Baba instructed him not to worry. No need for pilgrimage. Go back. After that, Chanji told him to knock 3 times on his bedroom wall. So Dad knocks 1, 2, 3. And from the other side comes 1, 2, 3. So my father had stayed at a hotel called the Royal. And adjoining this hotel was another hotel, the Regal. And Baba and Dad was in room 13 in the Hotel Royal. And Baba was staying on the other side in the Hotel Royal in room 13, which were attached. There was only a wall separating the 2 rooms. So even though Minoo could not see him, he was blissfully happy to have Baba so close by. A second story that comes to mind took place in Mahabaleshwar in 1950, where Baba had called a meeting with the Mandli. It was held in a stable where Baba gestured to Vishnu to close the door after all had gathered. Seeing an elderly disciple, Gustaji, approaching, Vishnu held the door open, and due to this disobedience, 2 unwanted men snuck in and bowed down to Baba, which was not allowed at the time. When Erich pointed out the mistake, they apologized and left, but Baba's mood was spoiled. In anger, he rebuked Vishnu for disobeying him, but right away he indicated it was improper for him to become angry. So he asked one of the men to slap him, which this unhappy person did most timidly. Okay, just like that. At once Baba said, "Is this the way you slap when you slap someone?" Then Baba asked Minoo to step forward and show how the slapping should be done. Demonstrating implicit obedience, Minoo stepped up and to the horror of all present, delivered a slap with full force. Baba immediately hugged him and applauded his obedience. So those were 2 stories on obedience. And now on the topic of faith. I recall a story that Dad related often, which I believe took place in Madras when Baba had invited any lovers who wanted to attend the darshan program. Minoo, along with his cousin Adi Dubash, were present when Baba was touring the homes of some local families to which he was invited. One location happened to be a cinema, which was owned by the mayor of Madras. Now, this gentleman, I believe, had come to the darshan program that was held the day before, and he quickly bowed down to Baba and took off. And Baba stopped the darshan program and pointed to this man and told the mandli to go and see, ask him who he was and so forth. But somehow the man evaded the mandli and he just left. Anyway, so Baba goes on his tour around the city. So he's in the car and he tells them to go to this certain location which happens to be a cinema. And this cinema was owned by this mayor of Madras. So when they arrived at the cinema, instead of entering through the main door, Baba rapidly walked around the side of the building to a staircase which led to a small room. Baba quickly climbed the stairs, opened the door, went in, and sat on a single chair in the room, which was like a prayer room with various pictures of saints and holy ones. Upon seeing Baba thus seated, the owner was overcome with joy and prostrated at his feet in tearful surrender. That was the mayor. The story goes that this gentleman had silently made a pact with God, unbeknownst to anyone, not his family, not anyone, that someday, if he was worthy of the beloved's grace, God himself would appear and sit in that chair. I heard this story so many times, but I never tired of hearing it because this made such an impact on me, right, about faith. So it was narrated numerous times through my childhood, and which always left me with a sense of wonder and elation, deepening my own love and faith in Baba. Let's see, what's the next picture? So this was 1962. This was after the East-West gathering, and that's my little baby brother that my dad is holding in his arms. And I had probably been sent away with some other relatives back to where we were staying, but Dad and Mom was still there because Dad was a volunteer. And after everything was over, the compound had been decorated with lighting and beautiful lighting and whatnot. And Baba was taken on a tour to see the compound outside. And while he was in the car doing the tour, he met Dad with Mom and my brother. So that's a picture of that one. And there we are as a young family, as a family, I would say. So every occasion, Baba's birthday, basically, and Silence Day were big occasions that we celebrated as a group in Karachi. And of course, every month on the 25th of the day was our monthly meeting, and the whole group would attend the meeting at our home. And we would start off with Baba's prayers, and then Dad would have some discussion, or news would be read from around the Baba world and shared with people. And then, of course, we would have some refreshment and so forth. So this is one of the occasions which is Baba's birthday. And so that's Mom, Dad, yours truly, and my young brother. So. And this is a picture of when Dad had taken Adi Dubash. So that's my father on Baba's right, and then Adi is seated below him to the right. Yeah. So, and this was in Meherabad. Yeah. Anyway, what's the next one? That's another one. There's Baba again, and that's Minoo and Adi standing next to him. So, okay, so I'm going to read to you now. What time is it? Oh my goodness, I better finish up here. I'm going to read to you a small conclusion, 220-75, which I think was, yeah, at the end of the book. So, Minoo says, in the realm of spirituality, everything revolves around the battle between love and lust. You see, there are different types of lust, aren't there? It's not only the physical. It's lust. It could be lust for fame, money, whatever. And from that battle, there is hardly any escape for anyone. I know this is why Baba always laid such great emphasis on it, and why I was ultimately to feel so blessed that Baba, for reasons of his own, chose to caution, protect, and save me to make me worthy of his final grace. For me, as time rolled on, lust feeling with its age-old tremendous tenacity started gradually diminishing and steadily ebbing, and the grip hold started becoming weaker and weaker. And thus, lust feeling has failed to overlap and crush love and obliterate it. In fact, love, from the very start, had simply point-blank refused to be subdued, even a bit, even with such heavy onslaughts for years. Love has at last triumphed over lust. Who else but a living God and his infinite grace could have done this? So in conclusion, I will say, love, faith, obedience, and surrender. These are the qualities of a true aspirant and seeker of God. If one has intense longing for God, his relentless search will inevitably lead him to the feet of his master. His implicit faith and obedience to the master's wishes finally culminates in total surrender. Mind you, this is no easy task and can only be possible when one has earned his grace. He then masterfully guides you out of the quagmire of your deeply rooted sanskars to help you overcome all the hurdles you put in your own path, and finally sets you free. This was the destiny of my father Minoo, a true God seeker. Jai Baba. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Avatar Meher Baba ki jai. Thank you. Jai Baba. Jai Baba.